Julian Fellowes disclosed a character element that is crucial to the plot of HBO's The Gilded Age. The affluent railroad tycoon George Russell, Morgan Spector, is based on a true story of a real-life person. Fellowes took inspiration for The Gilded Age, which takes place in New York City in 1882, from a number of historical personalities. George's relationship to a notorious real-life robber baron may hint at his family's difficult journey into high society, and the true story that inspired The Gilded Age may provide insight into what lies ahead for the affluent industrialist George Russell. George Russell of The Gilded Age was modeled after real-life robber baron Jay Gould, who frequently clashed with wealthy families. Mrs. Astor's 400 Club was a select club of individuals that Ward McAllister, played by Nathan Lane in The Gilded Age, personally selected. Mrs. Astor refused to accept Jay Gould and his methods as equals and expressed her disapproval of them. Mrs. Astor finally let the Gould family into high society a long time later. Given that the fictional Astor wasn't too fond of George Russell, his tale might be very similar to Jay Gould's. In spite of the wealthy and influential Astor family looking down on them, Jay Gould, the real-life inspiration for George Russell's Gilded Age true narrative, was a dedicated family guy in addition to being a vicious robber baron. George Russell and his real-life counterpart are similar in both of these ways. Echoing the real Mrs. Astor's feelings on Jay Gould, Mrs. Astor tells her daughter Carrie, Amy Fawcett, that the Russells are definitely not welcome into high society just yet, even if she intends to keep an eye on them. It's been difficult for the Russell family to break into New York's upper society, even if the fictional Mrs. Astor was captivated by George's acts at the charity fair, despite her usual lack of impression. At the inaugural edition of the official Gilded Age podcast, Julian Fellowes observes that Mrs. Astor finally took up Jay Gould's children after he passed away. It's an intriguing notion to welcome in a person's relatives after they'd passed away. In the first episode of The Gilded Age, Marion Brooke, Louisa Jacobson, who is also from Old Money, is told by Larry Russell, Harry Richardson, the New Money. The show seems to be establishing a kind of peace between the younger generation and their older counterparts, even if George and Bertha Russell, Carrie Coon, have little hope of being accepted by their Old Money colleagues. The events in the first season finale of The Gilded Age lend credence to this. In it, George and Bertha successfully persuade the wealthy elite to attend their daughter Gladys, Tessa Farmiga, debutante ball, suggesting that Mrs. Astor is granting Bertha admission into New York's upper classes. The similarities to the true story of The Gilded Age highlight how thoroughly based in history the program is. The Gilded Age has the luxury of using some artistic license in its storytelling, even if it is based on actual events. The Season 1 finale of The Gilded Age suggests that the Old Money crowd may be open to accepting George and Bertha rather than just their kids, which is a luxury that the real Jay Gould was not able to have. Even though Jay Gould serves as the inspiration for George Russell's Gilded Age character, in Season 2 of The Gilded Age, George and his family are doing marginally better than the Goulds, despite the difficulties associated with the Russells' ascension into high society. In Season 2, Fellowes delves further into the genuine story that inspired The Gilded Age, bringing additional historical events and real individuals from the late 19th century to the show. While Fellowes has once again drawn inspiration from specific events in Jay Gould's life, while sculpting George Russell's destiny and his family, the true story specifics of The Gilded Age are essential to the show's fascinating historical drama. In Season 2 of The Gilded Age, unions have grown to be a significant issue for George Russell's industrial interests. This is another way in which the real tale and the Great Southwest Railroad strike of 1886 are similar. During that walkout, many of Gould's employees lost their lives. Given that labor unions and strikes are still significant in today's world, Fellowes' exploration of this aspect of 19th century business goes beyond simple social commentary in The Gilded Age Season 2. When it came to suppressing or limiting workers' rights, the real Jay Gould and other businessmen who shared his views were merciless. Though dramatic and highly gripping, these George Russell narratives draw inspiration from an equally compelling historical event. The actor playing George Russell, Morgan Spector, has more than enough material to fully develop the role because to The Gilded Age's true historical inspiration. I studied up on Jay Gould and Cornelius Vanderbilt's lives because I had heard that he was somewhat modeled after them. Spector remarked, "I found as much first-person writing by those robber barons." He continued by explaining, "Both Andrew Carnegie and John D. Rockefeller have written books, and Rockefeller assembled a book-like compilation towards the end of his life. I've ultimately read The Republic for which it stands, a large doorstop book about the period that chronicles Reconstruction until the Gilded Age. Notably, among the many notable tycoons who never wrote their own biographies are Gould and Vanderbilt, the man who also serves as the model for George Russell. Furthermore, Jay Gould and Cornelius Vanderbilt were railroad and shipping magnates, in contrast to Carnegie, who amassed his wealth from the steel industry, and Rockefeller, who became wealthy from the oil industry. Even while Gould is still respected for his economic stance, in the end, larger tycoons in history eclipsed both Gould and Vanderbilt.